Welcome everybody to the new edition of the Beit Midrash Wednesdays for both men and women, 2 shiurim. And I want to talk today about a very interesting subject. As an introduction, in today's parsha we read about the preparation for the getting of the Torah, receiving of the Torah. And I mentioned today after davening, we have a short Dvar Torah. And I mentioned today that, that Hashem gave the Torah to both men and women. Moreover, He gave the Torah to women first, or He instructed the laws first to the women and then to the men. And the word in the Torah is in today's Chumash, from Revi till Chamishi, in the 4th Aliyah. Ko tomar lebet Yaakov, v'taged b'nei Yisroel. So you should say, so you should say to the house of Yaakov, which refers to the women, v'taged, and you should say the b'nei Yisrael, to the sons of Israel, to the men. You'll notice Hashem's talking to Moshe. Thank you, a good question. If you notice, when he says you should speak or you should say, so when he says to the women, Kot Tomar, you should say. And when it comes to the men, it says Vitaged. So you should speak. And it's a different terminology, even in English. When you say something, you say it nicely, you say it softly. When you speak, it has more of a connotation of being tough and serious and authoritative. Thank you. And that's the word tomar. Ko tomar lebeit Yaakov. So you should say. It says, the Rashi explains, that you should say it softly, gently, because a woman needs to hear things softly, not tough stuff. The guys, the taged b'nei Yisrael, devarim hakoshim kigidin. It's when you speak about tough stuff, then that's more for the men. Now, this is both a general statement that women need to be, just like men need to be prepared for learning Torah, also women. It's a general thing that should also prepare themselves for learning Torah. That's in general. On a more specific level, there are certain mitzvahs that are more relevant to the Jewish woman, and that's mainly the mitzvah that they need to learn. They can learn the other parts of the Torah as well. But the men need to learn all the Torah. By the way, when we learn Torah, it's not just things that we need to do. Learning Torah is the mitzvah of learning Torah. Of course, the mitzvahs that we need to do, we need to learn about them so we can be wiser, we can be more knowledgeable in how to observe the mitzvahs. But that's not the only purpose of learning the Torah in order to do the mitzvot. Learning Torah in of itself is a mitzvah. And we reach high levels when we learn lots of Torah. Today's subject is a very, very important subject and a sensitive subject, and that is the laws of Yichud. Not being in a private area with another woman. And so this is in the Rambam from a few days ago, in the one chapter a day. It's chapter 22 of Hilchot Rechavia, and let's give a little introduction to this. If we have to take, I know Rabbi Wilhelm that gave the shir yesterday. He's very into laws which are very relevant. So you could take, for example, a question that has come up recently. I'm sure it's even beforehand, whether or not women should also be in certain groups of the army, in certain kravi, in certain of in certain groups of soldiers. In other words, when they're out there and fighting in the tanks. So the underlining point over here is that the way Hashem created us as human beings, we naturally have temptations and desires, which that's how Hashem wants. He's the one that created us, so he understands how we're made. And it's obviously not just that men have for women, it's also women have for men. That's how Hashem created the world. As it says in the first parsha of the Torah. And so, because both man and woman are created in such a way, therefore the Torah, which is a Torah of life, Torat Chaim, it's not just to be learned in the yeshiva or in the Chabad house and then close the book and go home and we run our lives the way we want. It's supposed to give us, it's supposed to inspire us how to lead our lives on a day-to-day basis. So it gives us instructions. Even tells us how to sleep, tells us how to eat, tells us how to do all kinds of mundane matters, because it's not only about how to learn and how to put on tefillin and how to light Shabbat candles. As a human being, we have to be mensch. And the more we learn, the more we understand how we're supposed to lead our lives. So this is interesting. I once heard this a long time ago from a great Rav here in Yerushalayim. I heard when he used to come visit America when I was there, but he's, Baruch Hashem, still around, and he's a leading Rav. He said a very interesting thing. He said that there are 2 times in the Torah when the Torah says you have to go far away, not even to come close. That is when it comes to say a lie, chas v'shalom, midvar sheker tirchak. Excuse me, that's the key word, tirchak. From a word of a lie, you have to go far away. Don't even come close to saying a lie. You know, we have in the first Mishnah in the Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers, right at the end of the Mishnah, it says, Asu siyag la Torah. Make a fence for the Torah. In other words, Torah doesn't say you can't hold a pen, you can't touch a pen on Shabbos. We learn from the Torah you can't write, because anything that happened in the Mishkan, you can't do. Any of the 39 main works, main jobs that were done. So the rabbis came along, and our sages came along and said, if you touch a pen, you might naturally come to write. So that's called muktzah, for example. Muktzah means it's set aside. I can't even touch it. It's almost as if it's in another domain. And that's how we educate ourselves. We educate our children. Muktzah is a rabbinical precaution in order that you shouldn't come to violate chas v'shalom mitzvah in the Torah. So they made a precaution. It's called a fence. So here you have a fence. So let's say you don't want someone from the other side to come into the building without permission. So you put a fence. They can't even come within, if it's locked, of course, then you can't even come within this 2-meter space. So we also have an obligation to make a fence. So an example for that is sheker. To say a lie is so bad. Not only you shouldn't say the lie itself, but you shouldn't come even close to saying the lie. Midvar sheker tirchak. And the same thing is regarding non-permissible relationships. Whether it's with a woman, like the Torah says, in the whole list, in Parashat Achrei Mot, we read on Yom Kippur, and Parashat Achrei, soon after Pesach, and also one's own wife, when they are in the period when they're not pure. Lo tikrevu legalot erva. That's the word. Lo tikrevu, don't even come close. In other words, we have to be extra careful because these laws are so important. And as I started saying earlier, Hashem created us and Hashem knows what we're made of. So we shouldn't even bring ourselves that we should have to control ourselves. We have to always see what is the reality of the situation and to be cautious. Okay. So there are many, many laws about these. And we'll try to go through at least some of them. And hopefully, in the right time, we'll be able to expand a little more on that. Asur lehityached im erva min ha'arayot. It is forbidden to enter into privacy with any of the women forbidden as arayot. That's the whole list that it says in the Torah. Afilu ben zkena ben yelda. Even if she is elderly or a young girl. Shedavar zeh gorem legalot erva. For this leads to forbidden relations. Chutz meha'en min bina, a mother with her son, which obviously a son is not allowed to have relations with a mother, but a mother is allowed to be in private with her son. V'ha'avim bito, and a father with his daughter. V'ha'bal im ishto nida, and a husband with his wife who is in an impure state. Interestingly enough, to adopt a child is obviously a very special thing. It's uplifting and it's a big mitzvah. However, the Rebbe pointed out, based on this halacha, that you have to be careful, because if let's say it's a girl, then it's very natural that the mother is out working or doing shopping or whatever, and the father is home alone. So if it's his daughter, so we're not worried about going over the red line. But it's not his real daughters. It's an adopted daughter.
But under the laws, it's a real daughter.
We're talking about halacha. In other words, realistically, the law considers it as if it's a real daughter, but everything we could all understand, I think that it's not a literal daughter. It's not a biological daughter. Maybe for Yerusha, inheritance purposes, for example, or other things, it would be considered as if she's his daughter. But tachlis, bottom line, as far as the Yetzer Hara is concerned, or as far as the desires that Hashem implanted in our being, that it could go over the red line. So let me I want to hear the question, but let's say, for example, I see especially when it comes to these things, and I know certain families where they keep it a secret until bar bat mitzvah or until they get married. It depends on which there are many different circumstances depending on the specific situations. But on a general note, the style of adoption is that it's kept secret. If it's kept secret, they have to be extra careful. So maybe this is something for leading rabbis. The Rebbe didn't say that it's forbidden to adopt, but definitely it's something that should be taken into consideration and should be dealt with a proper to be careful with the proper cautiousness. Yes, Blema.
It could happen with a husband and wife when she's needed also.
That's an excellent question. You can ask the same question, but by the mother with her son, or the father with his daughter.
No.
I'm just saying.
Because you don't have relations with them in any case.
You're right. There's more, but that's dafka a reason. You're helping me out with the answer. The answer, the Chachamim say that because in a few days or an X amount of days, it will be permitted. The husband.
The desire is more when it's not permitted.
There's Hashem created the world, and Hashem gives us the koach, the energy to stand by. But because I'm just talking with the Chachamim, I believe it's in the Gemara that because it's going to be permitted, so therefore a person is not so. In some cases, we're not permitted totally. In some cases, not permitted, but in a few days it will be permitted. So that's more of a reason why it should be okay than with a mother and a son, that's never permitted. Or the father and his daughter, never permitted. Okay? Now sometimes by a chuppah, usually when we schedule a wedding, we schedule in a time that the kala will not be impure, will not have her period. However, what happens if sometimes things happen? By the way, it's perfectly okay if there's a wedding and the woman is a nida, the kala is a nida, it's perfectly fine. And now we're going to read about it now. Either it happened beforehand or during the wedding. The chatan shepersa ishto nida kodem sheyival. When a bridegroom's wife menstruates before he engages in relations with her, by the as far as the chatuna is concerned, asur lityached ima. It is forbidden for the chatan to enter into privacy with her. So usually what's done is that there is a child which goes to sleep in their apartment with them until it's over. A child which is in the age of 6 or 7, I believe, which is not a baby. Okay, a baby. What's a baby? It's like almost like nothing. You can do whatever they want with a baby there. But a child that's there, that's knowledgeable, and is still not too old, but he's pretty much there in the middle, 6 to 8, 9. That's usually what's done in that scenario. Okay. Next. Now, a woman that has never been, a woman that is not married, is not in the list of arayot. Is not in the list of women that are they're already married. Another relation, a close relationship, but they're not married. So, technically speaking, the laws of Yichud would not apply. But obviously, but the Chachamim, our sages, did apply this concept of Yichud for a Pnuya. Also with an unmarried woman. V'afal pisha eina arva. The Rambam says, even though she is not an erva. Bichlal Yichud arayoti. It's also considered not to be in a private area with it's considered an erva for this situation. Okay, kol isha she'asur lityached ima. Any woman that a man cannot be in a private area with her. Im hayta ishto imo. If the person's wife was with him, harei zo muteret lityached. Then this other woman can be in the same area, for his wife will guard him against transgression. V'chein ein mosrin tinok Yisroel l'kuti lamdo sefer lamdo omanut v'pnei shekulan chashudin al mishkal b'chor. So we have also a rule, which just see over here. Okay, we're going to get to that soon. So I'm going to leave it for then. Okay. Lo tityached isha achat afilu manashim harpeh. One woman should not be in an area with many men. Ad shetiyeh ishto shel achat mehem sham. Until one of them, one of the wives of one of them will be there. Okay. V'chein lo yityached ish echad afilu nashim harbeh. Also, one man should not be in a room with him himself with many women. Nashim harbe im anashim harbe en choshin liyichud. Many women with many men were not. We do not show concern for the prohibition against entering into privacy. Okay. Here's a very fundamental concept with regards to Yichud. A woman, a married woman, her husband is in the city. It's called Ba'ala Ba'ir. That's actually the title of this subject. Ba'ala Ba'ir. If her husband's in the city, Eina chosheshet leYichud. We're not worried for Yichud. Mipnei she'emat Ba'ala aleha. Because her husband's there, so we're sure that she's not going to transgress, and it's not going to happen. Now, what happened? For example, let's say there's a guy that comes to fix the air conditioning, very common, or a plumber. So have to be careful. To be careful of not being in a private area. A man with a married woman.
Is it only Jewish?
It's a great question. It's not. It also applies to Gentiles. V'im hayazeh gaspa, but if, let's say, they have a close relationship. Let's say they're related. It's not just a foreign. Usually, the foreign people they know the boundaries better. But if, what's the exact translation over here? If a man is overly familiar with her, for example, if they grew up together, or if they're relatives, then lo yityachedima, then they should not be in a private area alone. V'afal pisha ba'ala ba'ir, even though her husband's in the city. And also another way that Yichud is not considered Yichud if the door is open to Reshut HaRabim, the door is open to the public domain. Anybody can come in, so we're sure that nothing wrong is going to happen. And okay, now Yud Gimel, number 13. Mi she'en lo isha lo yilamed tinokot mepnei she'imot habanim ba'ot b'beit hasefer lebneihem v'nimtza mitgareh b'anashim. Remember I said in the beginning about regarding these laws, even if it's not black and white, specifically because these things are a gray area and you never know how a person feels and what's going on in their mind, and things like that. So there are certain things, certain precautions that we take in order not even to come close to a sin. So a man who's not married an unmarried man should not teach children. Interesting, because the mothers come to bring their children to school more often than not, and so more often than the men, I guess. And so therefore he will be mixing in with the women, and it's not a safe thing. V'chein isha lo telamed ktanim. Just 1 second, please. I want to get this. A woman should not teach young boys. Mepnei avotehen shehein bain beglal b'neihem. So if there's, I guess if there's, like in the younger ages in the school, so the fathers come to pick up the sons. So want to be extra careful not to come to mingling. Then it might come to a situation where they are in a private in a private domain together. And if the teacher is married, he does not need that his wife should be with him in school, but it's enough that she's at home in the same city. Okay. Ein lecha davar b'chol haTorah kula shu kashe l'rov ha'am lefrosh. There is no mitzvah no prohibition in the entire Torah, which is difficult for the majority of people to separate themselves from, ela min ha'arayot v'abiot ha'asurot, then more than sexual misconduct and forbidden relationships. Amru Chachamim, our sages said, regarding the mitzvahs that we received in the Torah about these issues, like I mentioned earlier, that we read on Yom Kippur. We read these words are written in the beginning of the book Bamidbar. When the Jews were commanded regarding forbidden sexual relations, they wept and accepted this mitzvah with complaints and moaning. Kiblu mitzvah zo b'tar omet u'b'chiyah. Shene'emar, as it says in the verse over there, when Hashem counted all the Yisroel, boche le'mishpachotav. The Chachamim say, al iskei mishpachot. The quote is crying among their families. What were they crying about? So the Chachamim say, crying about family matters. In other words, as I started saying, and it's important that we emphasize this, that this is something which is, Hashem knows how He created us, and therefore we have to use these special feelings and desires that we have in a kosher way. And to be careful, chas v'shalom, that it should not be a sin in the improper way. I mentioned a couple of times that we read this on Yom Kippur. So you take the parsha of Achremot, you divide it in half, pretty much. The first half talks about the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, the high priest going into the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies, and the second part talks about immoral relationships. So it's understood why we read on Yom Kippur the subject of the Kohen HaGadol, because it's Yom Kippur. Talk about his service in the Mishkan, in the Beit HaMikdash, on the holiest day of the year. But why do we do the second half? So some say, we do the first part, but we'll do the second part. But it doesn't work like that. Because the first part is in the morning, and in the afternoon, by Mincha, we read the second half of that parsha. Why? Can't find anything else, any other holy matters, instead of talking about seemingly such a quote-unquote simple mitzvah. Some will argue that it's not appropriate, perhaps, taking it to an extreme, of course, for a holy day. We're dealing with teshuvah and elevation and self-introspection. What are we talking about? The mitzvahs that most people, Baruch Hashem, do not commit prohibitions. So why is it so important to do that to speak on Yom Kippur? So there are a couple of points over here. Number one, this teaches us what Kedusha is. Kadosh, Yom Kadosh, a holy day. So typically, you ask someone, by the way, that's the name of these halachot are in Kedusha. Kedusha is Kadosh, same word Kadosh. There are certain things which are super holy. So you would think that these halachot maybe should be, in the book before this, Nashim, all about marriages. No, it's in the book of Kedusha. So here we get a lesson of what it means to be holy. Typically we think, holy is like someone locking themselves away for over 50 years, learning the Talmud, which is special, don't get me wrong. And maybe that's holy and special, but it's not only about secluding oneself from the day-to-day life, from the quote-unquote basic mitzvot. As if to say, these mitzvot are basic, and you want to be kadosh, then you want to know how to put on the tefillin, you want to know how to do the chagim, and so on and so forth. No. Kadosh, part and parcel of being kadosh, of being holy, is definitely knowing how to run our lives and how to be in tune with the yetzer, the inclination, the desires that Hashem implanted within our soul, within our psyche, and how to deal with them, how to act like a mensch, how to act properly, and not to act like an animal, like many other people, unfortunately, in the street do. They do whatever they want. They call it a free life. That's as if to say, instead of locking in marriage, for example, with one person, they feel as if they're free. But that's not really called free. That's called hefker. That's called open and without any limits, without any instruction, without any control. That's not the way Hashem wants us to live our lives. Hashem wants the world to be Yishuv HaOlam, Tikkun Olam. The world should be a proper world. The world should run the way it's supposed to. And the only way for us to do that is to act according to how the Torah teaches us. That's why in Yom Kippur, there's no better time than to talk about these mitzvot. In addition to that, it's important for us to remember that when we talk about these things, some of us might think to ourselves, oh, these are simple mitzvot. Who would dare to violate such a fundamental mitzvah and to violate the privacy of another person? Well, besides the fact that there unfortunately are people who don't have these boundaries, it's important for us to know that just like any other mitzvah, which doesn't only have the literal translation, interpretation of the word, there's also a deeper level and many deeper levels that we can uncover, which are very much related to this. And that is, for example, things which are related. The Tanya quotes, I believe it's the Talmud, that says, even thinking about these matters is already, in a sense, considered as if a person did it. And that's scary because in today's day and age, there's so much garbage out there, whether it's the internet, even in the street when you walk, or signs, different pictures. Just, it's crazy. Just looking at it for a split second, we're human beings. So, number one, what's the mitzvah? To turn your head away from it. It's not easy, but we have to do that. You see something? We're human beings. We look around, especially today. You have to look around because of to be safe, especially in Eretz Yisrael. You have to always be. So some people walk in the street with their phone. They walk in the street with there's the tzaddik that came here today to make our minyan. He's an amazing guy. Wherever I see him walking in the street, he always has a book. I don't know if you hopefully he'll come in again. But he came in for the whole minyan. He was learning the whole time. He's doing his stuff. When he walks in the street, he walks with his wife, and he's teaching her. They're both. So sometimes they both have books. It's cute. It's very cute. But I'm just saying that we have to be very much aware of what's happening around us. But why is it a good thing to look in a sefer? Because that keeps a person's eyes away from things that we're not supposed to be looking at. So I'm just saying that look how easy it is. Chas v'shalom. We're not talking about the literal prohibition. That's for sure that we all understand that that's a red line. But where people blur the red line, they say, it's not so bad, I didn't do it, what makes a difference if I watch this movie or if I have certain things? You have to be very, very careful. Because even looking at something, even for a split moment, can chas v'shalom in itself is forbidden. Chas v'shalom, it can bring someone to do the literal sin. And here's one more point which I want to share with you, and that's some people think that there's a violation that a person can violate with their hands. So you did it. So hopefully you control yourself not to do it, but that's doing the sin. But thinking about it, what could be so bad? So a person thought about. In a sense, I'm not giving any legitimacy, obviously, for violating the mitzvahs that we learned about. But I'm just trying to bring across the intensity of the prohibition of even thinking about these things, even the images and pictures in a person's mind. That itself is, in a sense, it's even worse than the violation itself. Why? Because when a person does something physically, it's sort of an external thing with a person's hands, or a physical person did something. But if a person, the power of thought is so deep, is so intrinsically part of our nefesh, part of our soul, that it's not, I just thought about it. If a person thinks about these things, then it's almost as if the bad images can become one united with the nefesh. If a person did something and it's terrible, it's sort of an external thing. It's not allowed in any way. But if someone thinks about it, in a sense, it's even much worse, because then a person is having these filthy thoughts and images. It becomes united with their mind, and once it's united, it's much harder to get away.
Just for men.
No. Why? According to what I said, it applies to women just as much, and in fact, I would say even more. Why? Because women are much more spiritual. Their neshama, they're much more in tune to their neshama. Guys, as holy as they might be, but they're practical guys running here. Women are soft, are sensitive, are much more understanding, are much more right? It's okay. I'm saying it's okay. So I would encourage women even much more. Not that it doesn't apply to men. It applies to men very strongly. But it applies, I would say, it applies to women. Where I'm getting at, by the way, so let me finish this point, is that how important it is to put a filter on a computer, put a filter on a phone. There are different levels, different companies, and every person can consult with their own LOR, local Orthodox rabbi, on what level of filter to have. But the filter has to be.
There's even a Malaki website called Guard Your Eyes.
Okay, that's good. And there are these social workers that help people who are unfortunately way too much into the pornography or whatever it is, that help them come out of it, help them come back to themselves. But what we can do is that each and every one of us needs to have a filter. And no one can say, oh, I'm too holy, or I don't need it, or I'm too old, or I'm too young, or whatever it is. Across the board, we need to be very, very protective of our neshamas. Yes, Bill, what were you saying?
No.
Okay. I'm glad that I'm glad.
Right.
Beseder Gamur. Beseder. And so,
are we the worst generation, or maybe the best generation, given all the temptation?
both, all of the above. I wouldn't say worst. I would say that starting. I would say that for the past 20 odd years, it's obvious that the entire world has been introduced to a whole new aspect of these terrible sins. And it's a huge responsibility for us to set the boundaries now. The better we set the boundaries, Shalom. The better we set the boundaries, the better it will be for all generations to come. And it's a huge responsibility for the leading rabbis of this generation to put clear guidelines. Unfortunately, I think that it wasn't put enough of a focus on, because it was a new concept. In fact, starting from the 60s and the 70s, the Rebbe spoke a lot about modern technology. It didn't come anywhere close to the way it's now, and the accessibility that everybody has to all this garbage at their fingertips. But the Rebbe spoke about the positive concept of cable television and so on and so forth, radio. Each time, in their own specific development of what there was at that time. And there were many leading rabbis, understandably so, that were very against it. And they're 100% right. And our Rebbe obviously agreed that they're 100% right. Because we have to be extra careful. And what do they say? 93% of what's on the internet is total garbage, and we're not allowed to. But nonetheless, that doesn't mean that the 7% is no good either. It's an out of the box thinking to be able to say, okay, let me see how I can get rid of the 93% and stick with the 7%, because you know how much goodness we can publicize to the world like you do all the time, and all of us here in our own way, telling people about the greatness of Eretz Yisroel, sharing a shir or a Torah thought. Sometimes you can get to people, if they're your friends on social media, you can get to them that no one else in the world can get to. Only you. That's unbelievable. That means that we have a responsibility to utilize that 7%. If Hashem gave us a tool, in this case of internet, do you think that the purpose of the tool is for the 93%? Sounds funny because that's the vast majority. But who says that's the main purpose? The main purpose should be for the Torah and the Kedusha, right? The Kedusha, the holiness, that we can impact the world with each one in our own circle. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, just a comment. When I worked 20 years ago in the television industry, the depths of depravity that is available and is reported is absolutely unimaginable. And what we're seeing now with Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein are just the tips of the iceberg. Hopefully
not, but you know the facts, and it's very painful. It's a chilul Hashem, desecration of Hashem's name, and I think the best thing we can do is to look forward and to try our best that these things are totally erased and not publicized. If they happened already, they shouldn't be publicized, because it's not good to have a Jewish name and the whole world knows what terrible. Okay, Hashem should protect us. So here are the last couple of laws about this subject. The Amru Chachamim, our sages told us, Gazel va'arayot, nafsho shel adam mitava lehen u'mechabdatan. A person's soul desires and craves theft and forbidden sexual relations. The eina tamotzeh kahal b'chol zman u'zman, she'ein ben prutzen ba'arayot u'biyot asorot. Unfortunately, you will never find a community that does not have some people who are promiscuous, regarding forbidden relationships and prohibited sexual conduct. Moreover, v'od amru chachamim, rov begazel, miut ba'arayot, v'akol ba'avak lashon hara. In Talmud it says, most people trespass with regard to theft, a minority with regard to forbidden sexual conduct, and all with regard to the shade of undesirable gossip. That's what we said earlier today, that we have to take ourselves away from mitzvar sheker tirfak. Have to go away from these prohibitions, which are unfortunately easy to transgress. Chaf lefichach. Therefore, ra'ui lo la'adam lachof yitzro b'davar zeh. It is proper for a person to subjugate his natural inclination with regard to this matter, ulhargil, and to train himself b'kedusha yetera, in extra holiness, u'machshava tahora, with pure thought, u'b'deya nechona, and proper character traits, kedei linatzel mehem, so that he will be guarded against them. The Zaher min Yichud. This is the title of the subject today, Yichud, which means to unification, basically not to be alone in a closed area. The Zaher min Yichud should be very careful with regard to entering into privacy with a woman. She'elu shehu hagorem hagadol, for this is a great cause of transgression. Our great sages would tell their students, Hizaru bi mipnei biti, Hizaru mipnei kalati, kedei lamed talmideihem, shlo yitbaishu midavar zeh, v'yitrachaku min hayichud. Be careful when you come to my home and my family are around me. In other words, they would bring it to the discussion that they should realize that it's not weakness to be careful in these laws of Yichud. On the contrary, it's a strength. We're realizing our character traits, and therefore, realizing in itself, knowledge is power. When we know what can come, then we are extra careful not to come even close to violating such a prohibition. Here's the final halacha. V'chein yinhag litrachek min haschok u'min hashikrus u'medivrei agavim. Similarly, a person should distance himself from levity, intoxication, and flirtation. She'elu hagormim gdolim v'hem ma'alot shel harayot, for they are great precipitators and steps leading to forbidden relations. V'lo yeshev b'lo yisha sheminhag zeh gorem lo tara yitera gdola mikol zot amru yifaneh atzmo u'machshavto devrei Torah. Greater than what we say of what you should not do is what you should do. A person should always turn himself and his thoughts to the words of the Torah. V'yarchiv da'ato b'chachma, and expand his knowledge and wisdom. She'ein machshevet arayot mitgaberet ela b'leiv panui min hachachma. For the thoughts of forbidden relations grow strong solely in a heart which is empty of wisdom. Uv'chachma hu omer, and regarding to the wisdom of the Torah, it says, Ayelet ha'avim v'ya'alatchen da'yer avucha b'chalet ba'avata tishget tamid. It is a beloved hind arousing favor, you shall be obsessed with her love. So that is when it talks about the Torah. So the more we're involved with the Torah, that keeps us away from the improper and forbidden thoughts and actions. I want to finish off with one very important point. That is related with what we said earlier about the idea of Yom Kippur and the holiest day of the year and reading of the Torah of these forbidden immoral relationships. In the Kabbalah, the section that discusses about, remember we said earlier about how the Torah talks about everything in our lives, including sleeping, eating, how we should eat, and all that. We have to, like I mentioned, you have to think about that it's to give us the koach, the energy for us to learn Torah. But the Kabbalistic teachings about proper relationships between husband and wife is called Kodesh HaKadoshim. Because I'm being required to remember the exact word, so please regarding this, what it's called. But definitely, I have to look it up in one of the Sfarim, but this is accurate. When it talks about the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, it's called Chadar HaMitot, the room of the beds. Now the obvious question is, can we not find a better terminology for the holiest room in the world than Chadar HaMitot? And that connects with the Torah approach to relationships, permitted, of course, and the difference between the way Torah looks at it and the way the secular world looks at it. The secular world looks at it as being something, quote unquote, mundane, sometimes even some might even call it immoral. In some religions, the priests, they don't get married officially, because the way they retrieve kosher relationships between husband and wife is as if it's a low down matter. Nevertheless, we see in the Kabbalah that the holiest room in the world, Kodesh HaKodashim, where Hashem unites with Am Yisrael, and you have the Keruvim, the cherubs on top of the Aron, hopefully embracing, because that's when Am Yisrael is doing the right stuff. That's called Chadar HaMitot. Why is that? Because if it's done properly, if it's done in accordance with the way Torah, as specifically teachers of Kabbalah and Chassidus, the way they teach us, which the underlining point is about the machshava, the thought, having pure thoughts, having holy thoughts, then that is basically like being in the Kodesh HaKodashim. That's like being in the holiest place in the world. And this connects very well with what we said earlier about we talked about the negative impact that can happen when someone thinks about or sees pictures or flies through their mind immoral relationships and bad images. We talked about how strongly that can impact the nefesh, the soul, because the machshava, the thought, is so unified. It's not only like a technical thing which is being done, which is bad in and of itself. But the closer you are to the nefesh, which is machshava, the thought, the more, God forbid, the more of a negative impact it can have on an individual. So now we're talking about, on the positive sense, what's the underlining thing that a person needs to have in as far as making a relationship holy and kosher and proper. And like the Alter Rebbe says in the second chapter in Tanya, that the neshama, the child that can be born from such a union, can really bring down a great level of neshama just from having the proper thoughts and from someone sanctifying themselves properly, not chas v'shalom in an animalistic way, but in a holy way, in a proper way. That is the best way, really, to bring down the greatest levels of kedusha. Once again, kedusha into our lives and into the families which we are building. So, in summary, what we learned today, several laws. There are many, many more, but I tried to give you some main points, and at least the general concept of being aware. Sometimes we're not aware. We don't realize. We're not, just throw one at you. They're a boy and girl are going on a day. You're learning in yeshiva. She's learning in whatever. And they meet at the lobby of the hotel, and then they go in a taxi or whatever, or let's say they drive. He drives her home or something. So you have to make sure that it's either not in daylight hours, but in places which are, like we said, Reshut HaRabim. I'm just saying there are a lot. We don't realize ourselves how often this applies. For example, in an elevator, it's not relevant, because an elevator can open at any second, and it's less the time. I'm just saying it's kedai. It's a good idea to learn these halachot more. Hopefully, we'll have the opportunity. But because it's the Rambam around these days, I thought it was an opportunity for us to at least bring it to the surface and to start talking about it. There's a number of great svarim that were written on this subject, and B'ezrat Hashem, we should be elevated and connect to Hashem and have more kedusha. Yeshakov. Thank you.